What gauge should you use when piercing facial piercings, or when your piercer pierces your face? Coming up next on Body Piercing Basics, episode number 149. For those who are new to the channel, welcome to the Body Piercing and Tattooing channel. Hope you're enjoying the videos. Hope you're finding it helpful and useful, but you may not know who this character is. My name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and operate the Axiom Body Piercing Studio, located right here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. So this is the sixth installment of me talking about the very basic information on body piercing jewelry. On this series, we've covered various different things. If you want to know more about body piercing jewelry and just the basics, check out the whole series. Today we're going to talk about facial piercings, and what I define as facial piercings is basically anything that's pierced on the face that doesn't go into the mouth. So lip piercings, all the bites, all that stuff, we'll talk about next time. This time we're going to talk about the ones that don't go into the mouth. Before we get too far into that, there is a couple of questions I generally suggest discussing with your piercer when you go in to get a piercing. The first one being is, what is your end goal? Are you going to be mainly wearing rings in these piercings once they're fully healed? This becomes a factor because certain gauge jewelry, it's easier to find than other gauge jewelry. For example, there's a much broader selection of 16 gauge hinge rings than there is of 18 gauge hinge rings. So if you are going to wear rings, you want a lot of possible selection, piercing that slightly thicker gauge of 16 gauge should make your life a little bit easier when you switch out to rings. The next one is, are you planning on stretching the piercing? If you're planning on stretching this piercing to a large gauge, starting at a slightly larger gauge, or at least the maximum they'll pierce that at, is generally a good idea to start with. So let's get into it. Facial piercings. We're going to start with the ones that I do, and the one that will go on to the ones that I don't, and in some cases don't advise. Starting with the eyebrow piercing. Eyebrow piercings are usually done in 18 to 16 gauge. Best option, in my opinion, curved barbell, 16 gauge. Generally either 5/16, anywhere from 5/16 to 3/8 of an inch. Nostril piercings. If you're going to stick with the studs, 18, 20 gauge, both of those are fine. Personally, I pierce a majority of them at 18 gauge. 16 gauge, if you want a large variety of rings, it's a slight difference between the two, and most reputable shops will have the jewelry in stock one way or another. With that one, I suggest getting pierced with a flat back labret, threadless, of course, just to make life easier and to allow you to have that big variety of different types of jewelry. That moves us on to septums. Septums are most commonly done at 16 gauge. However, you can do it at larger gauges. I've pierced up to, I think the largest I've ever done is 8 gauge. I don't think it felt good when I did it, but the guy wanted an 8 gauge, and it did take a long time to heal. One of the things you need to understand is that with piercings, the larger the gauge, usually it'll take a little bit longer to heal, plus you're dealing with the issue of weight because the jewelry is going to be bigger, thicker, and heavier, so that can cause some issues. Now, this one, most commonly, like I said, is done at 16 gauge. Circular barbell, so it's easy to flip up, usually about 3/8 of an inch, and then expanded so it fits comfortably up inside your nose. Number 4, we're going to move on to high nostrils. Generally, we do these basically with 18 gauge. I guess you could do 20 gauge because rings are not going to be a factor. Putting in a larger gauge there, unless the person is deciding that they want to stretch or you want to stretch, which I don't think I've seen anybody do that on high nostrils. But it's a possibility if you're patient enough. If that's the case, then doing it at a slightly larger gauge might make sense. But for the most part, they're usually done at 18 gauge. Next up is the rhino piercing. Rhino piercing is pretty rare, extremely rare, in fact. Usually done at 16 gauge with a curved barbell. They could also be done at 14 gauge. This is one of those piercings you're not going to see very often, or anybody's going to do very often. And the last one of the things that I will do, the mantis piercing. For those who don't know, there are 2 piercings on the very front of the nose, the point outward, kind of like 2 little eyes, like your nose is a mantis. A praying mantis. Anyway. 18 gauge. 18 or 16 gauge. Most people don't wear rings in these. I think it does look kind of cool when they do sometimes. Depends on the facial structure. It depends on the size of the nose. But that's kind of your two options, 18 or 16. Now let's move on to piercings I don't do or don't advise getting done. Majority of what's on this list I would consider high-risk piercings or piercings that are surface to surface, or in general I just don't like doing or don't like the look of. The other thing is a majority of these are best done with surface bars. For those that do not know what a surface bar is, it is a flat piece of metal in most cases, and then has two posts that come out at either a 90-degree angle or a slightly off 90-degree angle. I guess I'd be like about 65, 45, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, that wouldn't be 45. But basically, these are flat in the center so that they sit more under the skin. I don't suggest a lot of these if you do them with curved barbells, because there are people out there that will do them with curved barbells. It generally rejects. So, service barbells. Also, they have now the type that have sections cut out of them, which has the added effect of allowing the tissue to grow into the bar and make it more permanent, much in the same way you would with a microdermal. Now, whether or not that's going to be an issue with removing it or not, but that's a possibility too. Let's start off with horizontal eyebrows. Needs to be done with a surface bar. In this case, usually a 16 gauge. They can be done at 14 also. But yeah, definitely surface barbell. Anti-eyebrow. This one, I've seen them done with curved barbells. I've seen them heal out with curved barbells, but that was the exception. A majority of what I've seen have almost immediately rejected or migrated to an extent where they had to be removed. Needs to be done with a flat surface bar as far as I'm concerned. The angle really depends on your facial structure. Understand that it is in the area that gets a lot of movement, so it's an increased risk of rejection. Now the one that got really popular really quick and then hopefully has faded away now because I don't get contacted as often about this one. Surface to surface or surface trachea or sideburn piercings. They definitely need to be done with a surface barbell, either 16 or 14 gauge. They should not be done with curved barbells. They are just going to reject. If your piercer shows you jewelry and it looks like a banana, you need to leave. Now one that's done mainly with a barbell, and that's the bridge. Bridges are done from 16 to 14 in my experience, what I've seen. I think with this one, it really depends on how meaty that area is, because the larger jewelry is going to take up more room, cause more of a bump area, but it has that advantage of having more resistance. So it really depends on your anatomy. Talk to your piercer about it, see what their suggestions are. The biggest thing with any of these piercings I've talked about that I don't do is find somebody that does a lot of them, that's what they specialize in. Because letting people experiment on you that's never done this before usually has very poor results. Well, that's it. Do you have any of these piercings, and what type of jewelry were you pierced with? Till next time, here's hoping you'll be piercing skill with ease without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I hope to see your body piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you in the next video.